everyone, thanks for joining me on this Sunday afternoon. I hope you're all well. This episode is a compilation. It's 3 stories that really fascinate me, and I thought people probably haven't heard of them for a while, if they've heard of them at all, which they are quite popular, so I would have thought so, but enjoy anyway. Elisa Lam was last seen on January the 31st, 2013, in the lobby of the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. She was vacationing through the West Coast, documenting the trip on her blog and checking in with her parents every day. On January the 31st, those calls stopped. Lam had vanished. Soon the police were involved and her parents arrived to help with the search. They had nothing. That February, LAPD released elevator surveillance footage of Lam before her disappearance. The footage shows Lam behaving strangely in the elevator, appearing to talk with invisible people, peering around the corner of the door, crouching in the corner, and opening and closing the door. But what exactly is going on in this video raises more questions than answers. Theories range from psychotic episodes to demonic possession to unknown assailants just out of the camera's view. Around that time, hotel guests started reporting weird things happening with the Cecil Hotel water supply. The shower was awful, said one guest who spent 8 days there during the investigation. When you turned the tap on, the water was coming black first for 2 seconds, and then it was going back to normal. The tap water tasted horrible. It had a very funny, sweet, disgusting taste. It's a very strange taste, I can barely describe it. But for a week they never complained. We never thought anything of it, she said. We thought it was just the way it was here. On the morning of February the 19th, a hotel employee climbed to the roof and used a ladder to investigate the hotel's water storage tanks. That's where authorities found the decomposing naked body of Lam, whose personal items were found nearby. The tank has a metal latch that can be opened, but authorities said access to the roof is secured with an alarm and lock. After an autopsy, her death was labelled accidental. A lot of reports at the time mentioned the strange circumstances in the hotel's past. The single-room occupancy hotel has an unusual history. Night stalker Richard Ramirez, who was found guilty of 14 slayings in the 1980s, lived on the 14th floor for several months in 1985. And international serial killer Jack Unterweger is suspected of murdering 3 prostitutes during the time he lived there in 1991. He killed himself in jail in 1994. In February 2021, a Netflix documentary called Crime Scene: The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel explored Elisa's tragic case and the history of the cursed Cecil Hotel. The Cecil Hotel was built in 1924 by hotelier William Banks Hanna. It was supposed to be a destination hotel for international businessmen and social elites. Hanna spent $1 million on the 700-room Beaux Arts-style hotel, complete with a marble lobby, stained glass windows, palm trees and an opulent staircase. But Hanna would come to regret his investment. Just 2 years after the Cecil Hotel opened, the world was thrown into the Great Depression, and Los Angeles was not immune to the economic collapse. Soon enough, the area surrounding the Cecil Hotel would be dubbed Skid Row and become home to thousands of homeless people. The once beautiful hotel soon gained a reputation as a meeting place for junkies, runaways and criminals. Worst yet, the Cecil Hotel ultimately earned a reputation for violence and death. In the 1930s alone, the Cecil Hotel was home to at least 6 reported suicides. A few residents ingested poison, while others shot themselves, slit their own throats, or jumped out of their bedroom windows. In 1934, for example, Army Sergeant Louis D. Borden slashed his throat with a razor. Less than 4 years later, Roy Thompson of the Marine Corps jumped from atop the Cecil Hotel and was found on the skylight of a neighbouring building. The next few decades only saw more violent deaths. In 1962, 65-year-old George Giannini was walking by the Cecil with his hands in his pockets when he was struck to death by a falling woman. Pauline Otten, 27, jumped from her 9th-floor window after an argument with her estranged husband, Dewey. Her fall killed both her and Giannini instantly. In light of the suicides, mishaps and murders, Angelenos promptly dubbed the Cecil the most haunted hotel in Los Angeles. Now imagine finding your dream home only to realise that you're living in an infested demon portal that leads everyone to hell. From a possessed child crawling upside down to another levitating, what's been nicknamed the Demon House is downright terrifying. While these events may sound like something out of The Poltergeist and The Exorcist, it's true, at least according to the witnesses that lived and visited this home in Indiana. In November 2011, Latoya Ammons, a mother of 3, moved to a white rental cottage at 3860 Carolina Street in Garrett, Indiana. After moving in with her children and mother, the family allegedly began to encounter poltergeist activities. Immediately after their move, the enclosed front porch was inundated with enormous black flies. How is that possible in the dead of winter, thought the family. Following the incident, it became a recurring event that after midnight, both Ammons and her mother Campbell would hear footsteps coming from the basement and the slow creaking of the door opening entirely into the exposed kitchen. Without fail, any time either one would go check the basement, no one was there. One night, Latoya's mother felt a strange presence that awoke her. As she peeked outside her door, she was startled. She says there was a black shadow, pacing back and forth in the living room. She removed herself from her bed to find giant muddy boot prints. Not making a fuss over what had occurred, the family continued with their life at the Demon House. It wasn't until March of 2012 that what seemed to be odd turned to dread. One night around 2 a.m, family and friends were gathered at the Demon House to mourn the loss of someone close. According to Ammons, she went to check on her kids to find her 12-year-old daughter unconsciously levitating above the bed, and without hesitation, everyone gathered around the child and began praying until she fell back to the bed. It was then that Ammons sought help. Local churches refused to visit the home and suggested Ammons clean the Demon House by pouring ammonia and bleach throughout. Not only that, but to draw crosses on every door and bathe her children in olive oil. It was also proposed the family create a makeshift altar in the possessed basement. Regrettably, it wasn't doing much, so Latoya solicited 2 clairvoyants who claimed the house was possessed by more than 200 demonic spirits. The family didn't have enough money to break the lease on the Demon House. They had no other choice but to stay. Ammons began to exorcise the home. She did everything from only wearing white to burning sage and reading Psalm 91 out loud. Instead of things coming to a calm end, it only worsened. She also claims to have found her children speaking in tongues with bloodshot eyes and sporting sinister smirks. Her daughter said she felt like she was always being choked. Her youngest son would lock himself up in his closet to talk to a boy no one had ever seen. Around April, Ammons gave up and sought help from a physician. During their visit, the 2 boys, in diabolical yells, cursed the entire staff. A report filed by Department of Child Services and police stated that one of the boys had been magically thrown against a wall. After the incident, the boys proceeded to pass out and were hospitalised after. This is where things got a little out of hand. The youngest boy kept growling and telling his brother he was going to kill him, and began to hit his brother's stomach by headbutting it. Following the gruesome act, he allegedly walked backward, up onto a wall, made it to the ceiling and flipped over to land on his feet. During this time, the children were examined for any signs of abuse, and Ammons went through a psychological evaluation. To everyone's surprise, nothing was found. Either way, what had occurred in front of the hospital staff and police convinced the DCS to take custody of the children. Apparently, staff at the hospital reached out to Reverend Michael Maginot to perform an exorcism on one of the children. The Reverend visited the Demon House, where he insists he too experienced paranormal activity, everything from the muddy footprints to flickering lights that wouldn't stop every time he investigated something supernatural. Maginot knew he had to exorcise Ammons. He placed a crucifix against her head and she couldn't stop convulsing. With 4 hours into his investigation, Maginot established the house was possessed and demanded they seek shelter elsewhere. They couldn't. The DCS was far from done with their investigation. They requested Officer Austin to review the living conditions of the demon house. He stated in a police report that he'd seen and heard some unexplainable things. His flashlight flickered uncontrollably in the basement until it eventually turned off by itself. It alarmed him because he had just replaced the batteries that morning. Austin took pictures of the basement where he said he could see a cloud resemble someone's face, and even recorded audio where you can supposedly hear someone whispering, "Hey." He claimed that he brought something back with him as his driver's seat kept moving back and forth on his way home. The movement was so intense that his seat motor broke. A believer in the supernatural, the DCS still wasn't convinced. Without hesitation, Reverend Maginot continued to investigate the demon house, particularly the basement, with the police and Samantha Illick, the DCS family case manager. During his many visits, Maginot was convinced there might be a body buried under the stairs of the basement, which would explain the poltergeist activity. Police dug a 4x3 hole. It's here where they uncovered a pair of panties, socks, a cooking pan and a drapery cord. Illick claimed to have felt her pinky going numb after touching a sticky substance she found in the house. That same liquid was allegedly found dripping from the Venetian blinds in one of the bedrooms. However, no one could see where it was building. They cleaned it off the blinds to find the fluid dripping again. Reverend Maginot insisted the demon house needed to be exorcised. The 2-hour ritual, which consisted of prayers and performing an exorcism on Ammons yet again, was accompanied by 2 police officers and Illick. According to Illick, within 30 days after the exorcism, she went through a series of painful events that consisted of her breaking 3 ribs and obtaining 3rd-degree burns. Had something attached itself to her. Maginot continued to purify Ammons, even though she had moved to Indianapolis with her mother, but returned to Gary for the court hearings. During months and months of cleaning her soul, Maginot said she was clear of any demonic presences, and eventually the DCS returned custody to Ammons. Many speculate that these unforeseen tragic events were purely made up by Ammons, especially her landlord Charles Reed, to avoid any payment when living at 3860 Carolina Street in Gary. Anyone who lived there previously and after Ammons had yet to experience supernatural activity. The demon house has turned into such a pop culture phenomenon that Zach Baggins, the investigator from TV's Ghost Adventures, purchased the house to film his documentary, The Demon House. There has been no release date as of yet, but Baggins did demolish the house in 2016. Do you believe the story? Let me know in the comments. In 1804, Farmer John Bell and his family settled in northern Robertson County, in Tennessee, and became prosperous members of the community. In the summer of 1817, a cruel presence began haunting them. They saw strange animals on the property, heard knocking from within and outside the house, chains being dragged through rooms, and all sorts of gurgling and choking sounds. After a year, Bell confided his troubles in a neighbour, and a committee was formed to investigate. The presence became known as the Bell Witch, and her power grew, along with the crowds that came to feel it and, eventually it was said, speak to her. Though she never assumed corporeal form, many claim to have spoken to the Bell Witch. They say she knew details about the past and future and could be found in 2 places at once. Her goals were to slay John Bell and stop his youngest daughter from marrying a neighbour. She slowly ruined his health and daughter. After John Bell's passing in 1820 and the dissolution of his daughter's engagement the following year, the witch promised to return in 7 years. She kept her word, spending a few weeks with Bell's son in 1828, discussing the past and future. She said there was a reason Bell had to perish, but she never revealed her motive. She then said she would return in 107 years, but many think she never left the area at all, due to ongoing bizarre events in the town and the nearby Bell Witch Cave. In 1894, newspaper editor Martin V. Ingram published his authenticated history of the Bell Witch. The book is widely regarded as the first full-length record of the legend and a primary source for subsequent treatments. The individuals recorded in the work were known historical personalities. In modern times, some sceptics have regarded Ingram's efforts as a work of historical fiction or fraud. Other researchers consider Ingram's work as a nascent folklore study and an accurate reflection of belief in the region during the 19th century. In 1986, Tennessean staff writer David Jarrod and staff photographer Bill Wilson visited Bellwitch Cave, a source of ghost stories for over 150 years. Their plan was to stay overnight and detail their visit for a Halloween feature story. This is Jarrod's tale, as published in the October the 27th, 1986 edition of the Tennessean. Something very strange is going on these days, and these nights, inside the Bellwitch Cave near here. Photographer Bill Wilson and I learned that Thursday night when we came to Adams, with plans to spend a night in the cave, where legend has it the spirit of Kate Batts resides. It would be, we thought, a good story for Halloween. But we didn't spend the night. Instead, we were frightened away from the cave by something, we know not what. Maybe we were scared away by overactive imaginations, freshly fueled with stories of ghostly lore. Or maybe we were bamboozled by the cave's owners, who were trying to turn it into a commercially successful venture. Or maybe we did indeed encounter an otherworldly spirit. Maybe, just maybe, the witch actually exists. Our first look at the cave, an unspectacular-looking hole in a cliff near the Red River, came during an uneventful tour we made along with 5 other visitors early Thursday evening. We listened along with the others to the guides, 2 brothers who live on the farm where the Bellwitch Cave is located. They delivered a spiel that recounted the standard Bellwitch ghost stories. When the guides and the others in the group left the cave, Wilson and I stayed behind with our sleeping bags and gear. We'd been given permission to spend the night, but the brothers said they didn't think we should. They would never spend the night in the cave, they said. In fact, they would never go to the cave alone. We were undaunted. The cave that supposedly contains the spirit of the infamous Bellwitch, the ghost accused of haunting and eventually murdering John Bell in 1820, doesn't look scary. And as soon as the guides left, walking out the metal gate that guards the only entrance to the cave, we began making light of the lore and legend that surrounds the story of the Bellwitch. Big deal, I said. It's a grunge hole, concluded Bill, an experienced spelunker. We were in the first of 2 rooms or large open spaces in the cave that cuts 50 yards into the cliff and is lit with electric lights. We intended to sleep that night on flat rocks near an empty grave where a child used to be buried. You know, said Bill as he surveyed our surroundings, it's not the witches in this cave that I'm afraid of. Do you know what a brown recluse spider looks like? He pointed his flashlight to one of the pitted rock walls in the first room. It was covered with the deadly spiders, including one the size of $50 hanging in the middle of webs. There were so many we couldn't count them all. I don't know how we can sleep in here with those things, Bill said. They can kill you. It was at that point we heard the first noise. It wasn't loud the first time, just a new sound added to the relative silence of the cave. It came from the direction of the second room, 30 yards deeper in the cave. I peered into the darkness. Bill fell silent. He'd heard the noise too. The sound came again, louder this time, a raspy deep sound like an unwavering groan, or a big electric buzzer with a weak battery lasting a full 5 seconds. With the sound came several loud thumps, a sound difficult to make in solid rock. Did you hear that? I said. I've never heard a noise like that in a cave before, said Bill, who is a member of the National Speleological Society and who has explored miles of caves of all shapes and sizes in Tennessee and Alabama. He's comfortable in caves and knows what they sound like. This, he said, was not a cave noise. There was a third growl like before, but this time louder than our own voices and increasing in intensity. It seemed to just come from round the corner. Let's go, said Bill, and we went. We walked to the gate about 20 yards from the first room, stopped and looked back into the Bellwitch Cave. The cave is a strange place, W.M. Eden, 67, had said earlier in the night. It's where Kate lives now. Eden, a farmer of soybeans and tobacco, owns 105 acres of what was once part of John Bell's estate, including the cave, which he's turned into a commercial venue with $2 tours. Eden's son, Paul, says tour revenues are helping the family keep the farm that is suffering from financial difficulties. I believe in Kate, said Eden, dressed in worn overalls and an old plaid shirt. I call her a spirit and she's never hurt me. I've had to fight to keep the covers on my bed, and I've heard footsteps that lead right up to my bedroom door. You get used to it. Eden is a believer, and for those who believe, there are many theories of what the nationally known Bell Witch is, ranging from the ghost of a child whose grave was disturbed to an energy mass from another dimension. But Eden thinks he knows the real story, which he says was passed to him from a Bell descendant. This is his tale. Kate Batts was once John Bell's girlfriend, and early in the 19th century they were engaged to be married. But the plans soured and the engagement was broken off. When Bell later married Lucy, Kate was furious and tried to desperately break up their marriage. After years of torment, Bell killed Kate slowly. He locked her in the basement of his house and starved her to death. In revenge, according to law, Kate's spirit harassed him and his family and finally fatally poisoned Bell. Today, Eden said, he believes the ghost roams day and night around the Adams area with the cave as her headquarters. The cave was Kate's playhouse when she was growing up, and it's the only place she can call home now, Eden said. I wouldn't go down into the cave alone. People have heard too many things down there. Voices, singing, groans, growls, things moving around. There's something there. That's her place. As Bill and I looked into the cave we'd just left, we tried to rationalise what we heard and the feeling of being watched, spied on from around some dark rocky corner. We looked around the outside of the cave for someone who might have been making the sounds, yelling perhaps into the cave through another entrance. No one was there, and we found no other entrances. Loudspeakers, then, we said. For the cave to be a commercial success, it must have the reputation of having ghostly noises, and it helps when an operator can supply them on demand. Eden said he doesn't need to rig the cave. He said sound systems are bound to be discovered anyway, and they aren't needed with a cave that supplies its own noises. But caves don't growl, Bill said. We found electrical wires running into the cave and followed their path inside. The wires, though, were connected only to the electric lights strung through the small cave. There were no speakers or other noise-making devices that we could find. The cave was silent again. The spiders were enough to make us decide not to spend the night there, or at least it made a convenient excuse. But we wanted to stay in the cave a while longer. After all, the first sounds might have been the result of our imaginations. We sat in the first room and waited quietly. For 15 minutes there was nothing but the drip of water in the damp cave. Then there was a faint rumbling like thunder. It seemed loudest toward the front gate, and we walked there to investigate. It's just a jet overhead, Bill said as we neared the mouth of the cave and could hear it clearly. It was when we reached the gate that we heard the scream. It was a short, powerful burst of sound that reverberated from the back of the cave and hit us like a slap. It was not a metallic screech or the howl of wind. It was a vocal, loud, high-pitched scream. We looked at each other, got through the gate and quickly left the cave behind us. "Are you crazy? Run off by noises?" asked one editor the next morning. It seemed foolish to reply that many others, including journalists, have reported hearing unexplained noises and voices in the cave for decades. "You had a Pulitzer Prize-winning story there if you could have proven there were ghosts," said another editor. "You should have stayed and interviewed her. It would have been a terrific story." Now, in the daylight, Thursday night seems silly. Logically, of course, we frightened ourselves with our imaginations. Or somebody, some very alive human, frightened us for fun and profit. Those are the reasonable explanations. But Thursday night, with my scalp tingling and my hair raising, our fear seemed reasonable, common sense. Still, after all that rationalisation, there is the matter of my car. Last Tuesday I visited Eden at his farm to inquire about visiting the Bell Witch Cave Thursday night. I talked to him from my car with the motor running. During the conversation I asked him if anything strange, other than hearing noises, has occurred to visitors here. "Well, a lot of people come here and can't leave right away," Eden said. "They'll try to start their cars or their trucks, but they won't go. It doesn't matter if they're driving old cars or new cars. It takes them hours before they go again, and when they do, the cars start right up like nothing was wrong. The mechanics who come up here can't figure it out." As he spoke, white wisps of steam began to rise from under the hood of my car. The radiator of my 1986 Renault was overheating for the first time. Later, it needed less than a quart of water to refill it. As the steam rose, I turned off the ignition. Eden leaned against the car and smiled. "Gotcha," he said. And that concludes our Sunday video. Hope you all enjoyed it, and thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, please could you subscribe, like and share this video, and comment if you will, because it helps the algorithms. Until next week, stay safe, take care, bye.